On January 20th, 2022, I found out that I was expecting. I told my husband and he was super duper excited as well. And the first person I told, aside from my husband, was my sister. So I FaceTimed her and I'm like, look at this pregnancy test. And she's like, oh, go figure, I'm also pregnant. I was like, what? We were both really excited about the fact that we were both pregnant at the same time. So I told my parents, I was like, you didn't tell me that my sister's pregnant. My mom was like, yeah. And I was like, I'm also pregnant. She's like, what? We told other grandparents.
So you're trying to tell me you're pregnant?
They were super excited. We had gone clothing shopping once we were further along. Everything was going super smoothly. I was dealing with a little bit of morning sickness, you know, which is normal. We hadn't announced it yet, and I was due October 3rd. Everything was going smoothly, and then I hit 11 weeks, and all of a sudden, as I'm about to go to work, I start spotting. I felt fine physically, like I was not in any physical pain whatsoever, but I was definitely freaking out because that had not happened. I was like crying to work, I was praying, I was, you know, trying to keep my cool, thinking, you know, this spotting was probably just gonna go away, you know, maybe it was a little fluke or something. And I get to work and I hadn't told my boss yet I was pregnant. I tell her, I was like, hey, I'm pregnant and I'm spotting. I started crying. I was like, I'm so sorry. Like, I know I just got here. Like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what other arrangements, you know, I can make, but like, I really don't feel good. Like, I cannot perform my basic duties. They were like, oh, congratulations. Like, this is a super serious matter, but sadly, you cannot go home right now. Just take it easy, like your doctor said, and I'll be back and I'll check in. If you really need to, you know, go, then we'll think about it. That was around like 8 a.m. on a Monday. It hit around 12 p.m. and I was not improving. I texted my boss. I was like, hey, like, when can I go? And she was like, oh, you seem concerned. Not yet. I'm like, oh, okay. I eventually got off work and I scheduled an appointment around like 6 p.m. with my midwife. So we went in to check the heartbeat. We couldn't find a heartbeat and I had scheduled an ultrasound for Wednesday. So I wake up the next day. It's Tuesday. The bleeding seems to be dying down, but I developed cramps in my abdomen and my back and my legs, and it was similar to a period pain but not as bad. I was definitely a lot more concerned, and like first instincts was telling me like I can't wait until tomorrow to get an ultrasound. I need to go to the ER today. So my mom, she had to run an errand really quick and she was gonna come back. My husband was at work. It was actually his second day on a new job. It was around 3:30 and I started crying all of a sudden. Like, I just had a really bad feeling. A few minutes later I stood up and I felt like a gush, and so I ran to the bathroom. I called my husband. I'm like, you need to come home right now. And I didn't want to say anything over the phone, but there was like blood all over, and like I had bled through a pad within a matter of seconds. All of a sudden I got a call from another midwife who my mom reached out to, and she was like, what's going on? Like, how much blood is there? What color is it? And right as she's asking me these questions, I felt the baby pass. Right then and there, my mom got home. I was just in shock and I was crying. I knew it was the baby. It looked like a baby. It was literally like this size. That was really traumatizing to see my dead baby in the toilet covered in blood. I'm sorry if that's graphic, but I mean, I'm just gonna be real here. It's real life stuff. I mean, we can't sugarcoat things like this. My mom tried to put the remains in a jar so that we could take to the hospital with us. So we get to the ER and the nurse is like, all right, we're gonna put you in a wheelchair, because I couldn't really walk at this point because I was like losing so much blood. And he's like, yeah, your mom is gonna have to wait outside because we don't allow visitors. And I'm like, this is my mom. And he's like, sorry, you have to sit here alone. So I sat there alone in the waiting room for 45 minutes. My husband and my mom had to wait outside. I was in shock. I was definitely crying in the waiting room. So they took me back to a triage room, which is like the room before you get into an ER room, but they were gonna take me to the triage room and then take me back into the waiting room. They were just gonna drop blood. So the nurse walks in and she's like, okay, we're gonna put an IV in you. And I was like, what? So she sticks it in my arm right here, and then she started drawing blood. I passed out, and also I was holding the jar with the baby inside, and like when I gained consciousness, like it was on the ground. The jar was in a bag with blankets and stuff in case I had bled through the seat. It wasn't like spilled or anything, but she's like, you dropped your bag. And then all of a sudden, like, I basically like blacked out. I couldn't say anything. Like, I could hear what she was saying, I could comprehend it. I couldn't open my eyes. So then at that point, I heard the nurse say, like, she cannot go back in the waiting room and we have to get her into a room now. So she wheeled me into a room, and it took like 3 nurses to put me on the table. At this point, I was like crying, I was shaking uncontrollably, I was in shock, and they stuck another IV in this elbow. Throughout the entire time, I could not bend my elbows at all. And then they did a pelvic exam, and that was also painful. I honestly felt like I was dying in that moment. I was thinking about life and what I had accomplished, and all I wanted in that moment was just my husband. And they were like, oh, give it 10 minutes. All I wanted was just his comfort, and I couldn't even get that. I really did feel alone in that moment. There's like 5 nurses around me. So then finally my husband and my mom were allowed to come in the room. My mom told me later on, she's like, you looked like you were on the brink of death. Like, you looked super pale. Her thoughts were, what the heck just happened? That's the moment that I had to tell my husband that, you know, we had lost the baby, because I didn't want to tell him over the phone. That got me hard, just like seeing how sad he was. I was like, did this really just happen? It was really hard to come to terms with the fact that that happened. So they admitted me into the hospital, and they took me up to the family unit, and I stayed there overnight. So I'm up there with my husband, right? My mom left. The nurse comes in, and she's like, so did you get your shot yet? And I'm like, I have to get a shot? Me being terrified of needles, I was like, is there an alternative? She's like, sorry, there's no alternative. You have to get a shot. You can either get it in your arm, your butt, or your thigh. And I'm like, no thanks. So as she's about to give me a shot, the guy walks in, a nurse, and he's like, okay, I'm here to draw blood. And the nurse had previously told me that I was going to get blood drawn through my IVs, so they wouldn't have to poke me again. That's why the IV was there. But the nurse was like, no, I need to prick it in your hand. And I'm like, I'm like holding my husband's hand. And then it was over, and I'm like, okay, no more needles, I'm done for the night. I was still able to, you know, like laugh and smile and stuff. I was numb, and I still kind of feel that way. Then the next morning rolled around. I just remember like looking at my hands, and they literally looked like someone who was in a morgue. I was like, how in the world did I make it through the night? It's a week later, and I'm telling this story because every single night, like since then, I've been, if I go to sleep right now, is this gonna be the last time I'm awake? And I know that's like super weird, because I mean, like, I'm doing a lot better than I was. It really does hit you, the blessing of life that you have, how precious your life is, and how precious your baby's life is. I wake up every day thanking God that like I'm still here, because if I'm still here, you know, clearly I have a purpose. The doctor comes in and he tells me that I don't have to have a surgery, thank God. And like, I had tried to go to the bathroom. I literally sat up, and all of a sudden I felt myself passing out again. And I'm like, okay, let's just pee in a bedpan, because they wouldn't let me eat or drink anything when I initially got there, and all I needed was water. While we were waiting to be discharged from the hospital, Elijah wrote a song, because that's kind of like how he copes. He read me the lyrics. He just like burst into tears. I cried too, and it really did make you feel. The waves of emotions will like come and go. One day I'll be really great, and then like a few hours later I'll be bawling my eyes out. So then I finally got discharged from the hospital, and when I got home from the hospital, I think the worst part about it is like the physical recovery. So it's been about a week, and right where my IV was, it's really warm to the touch, and it hurts to bend this way and this way. More antibiotics, I guess. It just makes me mad that like I'm still suffering the physical consequences. I just want to feel better physically so that I can move on mentally. It hurts because of an IV, which is a hospital issue. It brings back the memories, and it's not cool. It's just like every time I had to take medication, I was just like crying. Sometimes on the outside, but every time on the inside. The feeling of not being able to function normally, having to have your husband and your mom cook you all your meals, like, it just made me feel bad. The recovery process physically just reminded me of the hospital visit. Something that's been hard is like whenever Elijah would scratch my back, it just reminded me of whenever the needles were inside me. I don't want a happy thing that always made me feel relaxed to turn into a trigger for a bad experience. So typically there are 5 stages of grief. First was shock and denial, just pretty much like that feeling numb, asking yourself, how did this happen? Like, did this really just happen? The next stage for me was guilt and pain. The doctor did say most of the time miscarriage is caused by chromosomal abnormalities, but there's still those thoughts in the back of your head of like, what if it wasn't that? What if it was I wasn't eating the right nutrients? I was under too much stress. You can't let it eat you away, and you really have to protect your mind. It's very easy to fall into blaming yourself. You have to accept the fact that you will never know why this happened. The third stage was anger. I think I was mainly angry about how everything was handled at the hospital, especially the fact that I brought the baby and I told multiple nurses, I told the OB, you know, is there any way somebody can clean it up, and nobody did anything about it. I never got to bury it or anything like that. I wish there would have been more respect towards it. The fourth stage is depression. It comes and goes in waves. It's only been a week, so I'm still like processing through all the emotions. It really hasn't been as bad as it could be, just because I have a really good emotional support. A lot of people have like sent flowers, so they sent really thoughtful messages. That was really sweet. And then the final stage is acceptance, which I'm finally starting to come to terms, like, this happened. One thing that really helped me was to make a little memorial. So I put together the first pregnancy test I took and the first outfit I bought for it. We named the baby Aspen. I wanted to make this video to spread awareness on it, especially for young moms. It really does suck, especially because it was my first kid. Being robbed of like that first experience, being robbed of all the future giggles and smiles and conversations and experiences. This was supposed to be its Christmas outfit. This was supposed to be its Christmas Day outfit. And this is what Elijah picked out. I mean, I know our next baby will get to wear these clothes, but it's just like, it was designated for this baby, and that's what, I guess, makes it difficult. I just want people to know that you're not alone, and also that dads suffer too. It's not just the mom. If you're somebody who's watching this and you may have not experienced this, but you have a friend who has or will, check on the dad as well. Make sure that he is also doing good. You are not alone. Just remember that, you know, if you're going through this, it is a process. Don't brush it under the rug right away. Make sure you're actually feeling those emotions and expressing them and letting them out and talking to people about it. Think of something you can have to embrace the happy memories. It is scary, but honestly, I'm thankful that I got to carry a life for 11 weeks. It was precious. Honestly too, another thing that really like has helped me through the process is my faith. I truly believe my baby's up in heaven and that I'll get to see it one day. That's the hope that I can cling to. We live in a fallen world. There's bad things that happen that we can't explain why, but there's still hope. I don't want to live in the mindset of what I lost. I want to celebrate its life and think about the good memories I did have while I was pregnant. If you're a mom and you have a baby, hug your babies. Spend time with your kids. There's people out here who wish they had the opportunity that you have. Be grateful for your kids. If anybody's struggling, I'm here for you. I'm always here to chat.